presence of the Holy Spirit with us this morning. That you do fill this place, and that we are becoming your presence. Just ask that we continue through our sermon and teaching and learning time that you will fill a special sense of your presence through that and through our lives, and that we will flow from you today. Flow of your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thought you were already headed up there. All right, there you go. Okay. Thank you.
Good morning. We had some beautiful songs this morning about healing, and my scriptures this morning is all about two different stories about healing and the faith of the person who was healed. So we're going to be talking about Matthew chapter 8, 1 through 13. So there are two different stories. And the first story is found in verses 1 through 4. Large crowds followed Jesus as he came down the mountainside. Suddenly a man with leprosy approached Jesus. He knelt before him, worshiping. "Lord," the man said, "if you want to, you can make me well again." Jesus touched him. "I want to," he said. "Be healed." And instantly the leprosy disappeared. Then Jesus said to him, "Go right over to the priest and let him examine you. Don't talk to anyone along the way. Take along the offering required in the law of Moses for those who have been healed of leprosy." It is Hansen's disease today. It is a long-term infection by the bacteria Mycobacterium leprae. The infection can lead to damage of the nerves, respiratory tract, skin, and eyes. The nerve damage can result in the person not being able to feel pain. So a lot of times some of their extremities or part of their extremities are lost because they get a sore, it gets infected, they're not aware of it. Or they can have repeated injuries and not know it because they don't feel the pain. It's my understanding that in the day of Jesus, their ability to diagnose leprosy was really sketchy. If it was red and it was scaly, it was leprosy. So I'm thinking there were a lot of people out there at that time who had psoriasis or eczema, and they were thought to have leprosy probably. And leprosy is actually still with us today. You don't ever hear about it, do you? But there are about 200 cases that are diagnosed each and every year in the United States. And believe it or not, there are still leper colonies on the face of the earth. They can be found in China and India and parts of Thailand and Africa. Now, if a person truly had leprosy, the disease was very debilitating. And then the social stigma may have been even worse. Leviticus 13:45 through 46 tells us how a person with leprosy was to live. And the scripture says, "Those who suffer from any contagious skin disease must tear their clothing and allow their hair to hang loose. Then as they go from place to place, they are to cover their mouth and call out, 'Unclean, unclean,' as long as the disease lasts. They will be ceremonially unclean and must live in isolation outside the camp." Jesus was coming down the mountainside when the man with leprosy approached him. Maybe he was in the area where the man isolated. There were purity laws back then, and the man with leprosy was not supposed to come close to Jesus or anyone. No one was supposed to touch someone with leprosy, yet he knelt before Jesus, worshiping him. To kneel is to humble oneself. Could he have known Jesus was a man and he was God? The man stated his belief, "If you want to, you can make me well again." He was violating purity regulations to approach Jesus. Jesus violates the purity regulations when he reaches out and touches the man. The man's faith must have been so strong that he was willing to examine you. Don't talk to anyone along the way. Take along the offering required by the law of Moses. What I found about what the law required was found in Leviticus, which was, my understanding, written in the day of Moses. So there's quite a bit of time that's passed. Some of these requirements may have changed. However, the requirements were pretty lengthy. 32 verses in Leviticus 14. I'm not going to bore you with all that. I'm going to give you the short version. So, seeking purification from a skin disease involved a ceremony with 2 live birds, and they were to be birds that were approved to be eaten. Then the second step, there was a cleansing ceremony, and the person being purified were to wash their clothes, shave off all their hair, and my understanding is that even included your eyebrows, I mean all your hair, and bathe in water. They then had to isolate 5 quarts of choice flour mixed with olive oil, 3/5 of a pint of olive oil, and there was to be a sin and guilt offering. I found in Mark 1, verses 40 through 45, the same story, but there's a difference in Mark, because in Mark it says that the man who went on his way, he spread the news. Jesus asked him, "Go and tell no one," but he spread the news, telling everyone what had happened to him. And as a result, the crowds surrounded Jesus so that he couldn't enter a town anywhere publicly. He had to stay out in secluded places. But people from everywhere came to him there in the secluded places. The man was probably so thrilled to be healed, he probably wanted to tell everyone. When he was instantaneously healed and met what was required by law, he could be with people again. Who knows? Maybe he had a wife and children he had to isolate from. Maybe he had other family members he wanted to be near, but he was supposed to isolate. We don't really know, but what we do know is how difficult it was for us to isolate during COVID. I'm sure we all remember that. The crowds came